Hello, and thank you for joining us for episode 11 of Proof Point, the podcast by Caribbean User Experience Q. My name is Suzette Merrill, and I will be your host. Proof Point, the podcast aims to give focus to user experience philosophy, which simply supports that we are all users of something. That user experience design, the methodology, is multidimensional and is not solely digitalization, technology, or computation, but is also how we design customer, consumer, and employee services, systems, workplaces, software apps, and websites, and what everyday people and organizations can do to achieve mutually beneficial outcomes. In the first half of this episode, we will find out what is AI and what is behind its creation, as well as how does it impact our experiences and what does society need to know. To talk us through this discussion is Maikel Groenewoud, a native of the Netherlands with roots in Suriname. He is the manager consultant for Ernst & Young in the Netherlands, and his specialty is AI and data science. Maikel, it's so wonderful to have you here. I would really like you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, but I also would like you to drop in something that nobody else who's interviewed you have heard. So if you can do that for me, I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, Suzette, first of all, I also want to thank you for this invitation. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about various topics. And I think a bit about myself. My name is Maikel Groenewoud. So I live in Amsterdam. I was actually born and raised in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I'm in that sense very much tied to the city. And a bit of my background. So currently I work at EY, which used to be called Ernst & Young, but nowadays they shortened it to EY, like a lot of companies do, just to sound flashy or whatever, I think. But that's where I'm at right now since 2016, and I'm really working as a manager focused on data science and AI. On the one hand, looking at how can you do the technical side of it, and on the other hand, also how can you do it in a responsible manner? Because when you talk about AI, there's a lot of discussion, let me say it like that, a lot of discussion also about it. So it's also good to look at how can you do that responsibly. And so that's what I'm working on. Before this, I worked a long time as a policy researcher. And one thing that people don't ask me about, like, I think you already know me a little bit. I think what you can say is that even though I work in data science, it is clear that I actually love history and I love language a lot. So you could also say that I'm more like I'm actually maybe a historian and a linguist who does a little data science as a day job. You could also say that. Other than that, I think I think it's good to mention that we have a Caribbean connection, of course. That's something that I like about our connection. So you're in St. Lucia. Even though I'm in Amsterdam, my family is in Suriname in South America, but also considered part of the Caribbean. So that is something that, I really like that connection. That helps us really fight with each other. So that's an important aspect in the background. It's like a Caribbean connection, even though we are very much apart when you look at space, but at the same time, we still have found that connection. So that's something that I also really appreciate.
Excellent, Maikel. Well, you did fill in all of the areas I was hoping for. We wanted to bring in that Caribbean Suriname flavor there. And the fact that you a historian, or you love history and language, and we even in our intro discussion prior, we found that has its place in what you do presently. So let us start off with the subject matter, AI. What is artificial intelligence, and what is the aim of AI?
So let me start with the first part, like what is it? The interesting thing with the term is AI, it stands for artificial intelligence. It kind of suggests real intelligence. Well, that's not really the case, but what you perhaps could say that it refers to like systems that are able to in some ways mimic human intelligence or to perform certain tasks in a apparently smart manner. But the reality is that it's not really intelligent, at least not yet. Like what we refer to as AI nowadays, it doesn't really understand what it sees. So it's able to do stuff that might look smart. It might be able to like help people in the sense that it might do certain stuff very efficiently, but it doesn't really understand what it learns and what it does. So like it might see the patterns, but it doesn't necessarily understand those patterns. So I think that's it. Yeah, the term it suggests a lot, but I think it's also important just to say like it isn't actually really intelligent. And I think what you also see a lot nowadays is that it uses kind of like an umbrella term for a whole lot of things. So basically, whatever people do when it comes to data or analytics or whatever. Nowadays they call everything the AI. But in reality, like it's also kind of like a rebranding. Like you put everything under the umbrella. Not everything is AI, but like I said, not everything is intelligent and not everything is really that advanced. But it's also a hype term because like when you sell it as AI, then of course it sounds fancy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it really is that fancy. But yeah, so that's a bit about like what AI is. So you see AI in a lot of different places, like when you use your phone. There's a lot of AI in there, but also like just when you work on your computer, like in a lot of the software that we work with. Actually, there's a lot of intelligence also incorporated there that makes it easier to work, or make it easier to create PowerPoint presentations and other stuff. So actually, AI, you see it in a lot of places integrated, that intelligence. So that's also interesting to when you think about AI, like it can manifest in so many different ways, and it's very much a part of a lot of things that we do in our daily lives, a lot of the tools that we use, a lot of the tools that we interact with. So even though might not be necessarily that much aware of the fact that AI is a part of it, in reality it often is. So that's also interesting to see how it can manifest, and can manifest in very in various ways.
But question quickly, what are the key elements of creating an AI platform object? Would you say it's a computer, a device? Would you say, of course, data is key because this is how it's translated. What are the main key elements of an AI creation, let us say?
Yeah. I think when you look at, like I said, like it can manifest in various ways. So like some of the manifestations that you see is, for instance, in the field of speech recognition, that you're able to like talk to your devices, that they're able to like maybe interpret, or in a way are able to like process what you said and also actually respond to that. But it can also be, for instance, in the field of computer vision, that computers are able to, in a way, mimic like how we see, how we perceive the world around us, that they're also able to mimic that. So that are some of the manifestations of AI. And when you then break it down to like, okay, that's on the surface, like how it can manifest. But when you look at the core or what lies underneath that, the current generation of AI is very much based on machine learning, and that's very much based on indeed learning from data. So whether it then might be in the field of speech recognition or computer vision, or if it's natural language processing or generation, the underlying key element here is machine learning, specifically deep learning. That refers to like a subset of machine learning that uses what is called neural networks. And neural networks, that again, that is also a term that again suggests a whole lot of intelligence, because it kind of makes you think like, okay, it's just like the human brain, because you call it the neural network. But the reality is that also that, for instance, we don't even really know how the human brain really works. So it's just like, it's maybe a reflection of an element of our understanding of how the brain works, but also there it's like it isn't like a real brain or whatever. So it's just like I said, we look at AI, it looks at patterns, so in the data, so it sees like, okay, it may not understand what or why things are that way, but it is able to detect the patterns there, and is able to like make predictions based on that, or also take decisions based on the patterns that it finds. But I think like I think that's the key component in the current generation: the data, the machine learning that then learns from the data, and it can manifest in various ways. Like I said, speech recognition, computer vision, that's one area. Also language. Also language generation. Actually, that's also a thing that it can do. But the underlying thing is like like I said.
Okay, so let us talk about how does it impact our experiences? Because we need to use devices for the data to be collected, for there to be interpretation, correct?
Yeah.
So how does that impact our day-to-day experiences? And what does a society need to know? Because we all know societies are not on the same level of advancement technologically. So this part, how does it influence our experiences, and what does society need to know?
Like how it influences our like experience. What you can, I think there are multiple ways that you can approach this topic. I think you can say like, how does it influence the experience? On the one hand, it can, for instance, be that maybe a smart system is able to provide more tailored recommendations to a person. in that sense, you could say that your user experience becomes smoother because like you don't get irrelevant recommendations. You get recommendations that might be more tailored to maybe your history of, for instance, your purchasing history, or maybe your profile as a person, maybe based on certain characteristics. You say like, okay, based on that, that recommendation might be a better fit with you, or maybe people that, for instance, people with a similar profile were interested in that, then you might also be interested in that. So in those kinds of ways, you can say like it can make your experience as a user smoother, but at the same time, you can also say like, okay, if the recommendations are always like based on your profile or your history or whatever, that can also mean that can become like almost like trapped in a situation where you only get shown things that seem to relate to how the system understands you or believes you to be, and that may mean that other things won't be shown to you. And that's also a thing to consider, like when you talk about the user experience, like on the one hand, it might be more tailor-made, but at the same time, that then also means that the tailor-made side is then determined by a system. So if you want to go outside of that box, well, that might not necessarily be what you'll see in your recommendations. So that's two sides to that like personalization side of as it relates to the user experience. And I think what's important for societies to know, I think just also for people to know, is that since this current generation of AI is so much based on data, it really requires data to learn from. That also then means that your data is indeed actually very important. So your data has value. So that's, I think, an important thing to realize then, that that it's not only that this is valuable, but also that then it also can mean that like how you are approached for your data, that is also a way to, in a sense, you could say, extract value from you. You could also say that it's kind of like you're a source, kind of like you are a source that can drive the evolution. You can drive the basically the growth of the technology, but it requires that data from you. So in a sense, you could say that we as humans are then mined also for our data, the data that we can produce. So those systems can function, but at the same time, then also the corporations or the organizations that create those systems, that they can flourish, because they can they also need the data from us to be able to flourish, you could say. So that's an interesting thing to consider, because oftentimes people might provide the data for free, for instance, when using systems. But then when you realize that your data is actually quite valuable for organizations, that also is an interesting thing to consider, that maybe, for instance, they might monetize your data, they might profit from the data, while you are not necessarily profiting, other than the fact that you might have a smoother experience, for instance. But that's just to show that there are sides to it. Like on the one hand, by providing your data, your experience might be smoother, but at the same time, you also provide something of yourself, and you can also provide barrier experiences. Like, okay, if data is so important, to tailor systems to you, but if you don't provide the data, okay, then the system might not be tailored to you, or maybe it could even go that as far that access might be denied to you if you don't agree to, for instance, provide your data. So those are just some reflections to think about. That can be interesting when, especially when you can say that AI, like I said, is being infused more and more. You see it in more and more places. So those are some things to keep in mind, that there are always multiple angles to the story, and that does make it interesting, and makes it important to be aware, and also maybe a bit mindful of the fact that there's so many sides to.
Thank you immensely, Maikel, for spending this time with us. What an awesome end to part 1 of this episode. Catch part 2 this Tuesday, 21st September at 6 p.m. EST on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. You are watching Proofpoint, the podcast, produced and directed by Caribbean News Xperience Q. Thank you for watching.